G'day everybody, welcome back to the channel. Okay, today I'm going to talk to you about a couple of things, but first of all, I'm going to be a bit of I've turned into an expert coffee making person. Excuse me. Got myself a new machine. So, I will take you out there and I'll show you my new machine. So here it is. Here's my new fully manual espresso coffee machine, which does just about everything. I've got myself a lovely coffee grinder, scales, all the bits and pieces that one needs, some chocolate for sprinkling on top. And here is my good friend Nathan from Cartel Coffee Roasters. This is and one of the jars that you can buy from Cartel in at Geelong. Fantastic guy and a fantastic coffee shop. My favourite. So here's the machine. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk today about the integration of the subwoofer into my system and the settings that I did with the Wilson watch controller. So that's where we'll cut to next, and I'll walk you through that whole process and show you how I've got amazing integration of that subwoofer into my listening room, and how essentially it's on all the time now, and it just, what it's doing is, well, we'll talk about at the end of the video, so hang around. Okay, so now we're back in the room. I'll give you an explanation of the signal path that I'm using for the subwoofer, and we'll show you what settings we've got on the watch controller, and then I'll talk to you about how I'm finding all of this sonically in the room. So the signal path is obviously right there behind us. We've got the watch controller. That's it there. That's hard to do when you're looking at the camera. So luckily I have 3 outputs on the Vitus preamplifier. I have 2 balanced outputs and a single-ended output. So what I'm able to do essentially with this setup now is run balanced connectors out of the preamplifier to the Vitus monoblocks, and I'm also able to use a set of balanced outputs from the preamplifier over to the watch controller here. So I'm using a set of balanced interconnects going into the watch controller. Then I'm using a balanced output from the watch controller that heads down to the Audio Research DS450 monoblock. So it's the Definition Series Audio Research D-Class amplifier. So it produces 450 watts. It's one channel or one monoblock amplifier. So it has either a single-ended or a balanced input. I'm using a balanced input, so coming out of the watch controller there down to the amplifier in a balanced interconnect cable. Then I'm running Kimber cable out of that amplifier around and over to the subwoofer. So the subwoofer being a passive subwoofer, the Series 2 Watchdog, it receives all of its information from the Audio Research amplifier. So that's essentially the signal path that we're dealing with here. Spoilt for choice, luckily, with the Vitus preamplifier having 3 outputs, so I'm able to literally either go single-ended or balanced, but I'm a balanced kind of guy. So if I can use balanced connectors, I'll always attempt to do that. Nothing against unbalanced connectors at all. But I guess it's the audio engineer in me running great copious lengths of wire from a mixing desk around to a live venue. Everything was XLR cables for obvious reasons there, for its noise rejection capabilities and topology. So I've employed the same system here at home where I can. Let's talk about positioning of the subwoofer. So I tried positioning the subwoofer in 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 different positions. I found there were 2 positions that really worked equally as well. One of them is where you've been seeing it over there. So when I'm seated in my chair here, it's on my left side, and it's I guess just in front of me and over onto the side wall, the left-hand side wall. I put it in essentially its mirrored position on the right-hand side, and I got equally as good integration, but there's quite a lot of records I've got over on this side here, and so it made it difficult to move everything around, and just purely and simply it worked out aesthetically in this room to be better to leave it on the left-hand side, and that is the only reason it ended up there. I had tried it on the very back wall, and I could get pretty good integration there, but I just got more slam and more real percussive punch when I had it on facing toward the couch that I was sitting in on the side. And so, and then I had it further forward over here on both sides. So I guess on the sides of the speakers facing toward the listener. The integration there was not as good. So I ruled those positions. So six positions. So I ruled those positions out fairly quickly because they just wasn't getting that seamless integration that I got directly from the side. So that's why we went with that position there. So I'll spin the camera around and show you, as you can from this position, you can see there. That's essentially that's the seated position there. That's usually where I sit, where my tablet is, and that's where the subwoofer is. Now, if we sort of stand up, you can get a bit of an idea about how that would be focusing in at me. And if we turn the camera around this way and look at the opposite side, well, as you can see, there's quite a lot of media there, and whilst I could move it and get really good integration, and then I had it more sort of here in this area, just near the door, and then over here, in this position over here as well. But really, when I did that, I just didn't get the same sort of integration that I got putting it directly on the sides. So that's why I went with that option. Forgive my camera skills here, but that's essentially why I went with the option of putting it on that side over there. I just got great integration, and I'll talk to you further about what happened with that integration and what happened sonically between not just having the Alexias running and having the subwoofer, the Wilson subwoofer, integrated, because quite a lot changed. So now we'll go to the watch controller here, and I'll explain the settings and what I've used and what I haven't used in the watch controller, and then we'll talk about the sonic impressions from this current setup. Okay, so here we go. The first switch here is a balanced or single-ended. We've got it on balanced for the reasons that I described. The next switch gives us a line. So obviously I'm doing it from the line setup, and you can probably just see under there. There it is. So hence that's why that one's lit up. Now with the high pass filter, we're not using it. To integrate the high pass filter would mean, and I did try this, and that would be crossing the Alexias off at about 50 hertz and bringing the subwoofer in at around sort of 40 hertz or thereabouts. But there was just a real sense of me being able to hear in my system in this room that crossover point. As much as I tweaked it and fiddled around with it, I just simply could not get the high pass integration working. So I've ended up running the Alexias at full range, and we're just using the low pass aspect of this active crossover. So obviously the next switch along gives us that or indicates that I've just turned this frequency crossover right around to sort of 30 hertz, and I've the high pass is out. So there's no high pass filter being used in this setup. Whether it be a 6 or a 12 dB slope, it's irrelevant because we're not using it. So the next feature along is the low pass frequency that we are using. So as you may be able to see here, I've got the crossover at around 60 hertz. That seemed to be where I really got a beautiful seamless transition. So that is set at 60 hertz there. Obviously the low pass filter is in, indicated by the LED light there. And I am using that on an 18 dB slope. So it's a fairly quick crossover slope, and that worked beautifully because it allowed the speakers to shine and do what they do at full range, and the subwoofer just to come in and handle that lower octave from 60 hertz and down. So the next thing along is the phase adjustment. So we can go from obviously from 0 around to 180 degrees of phase adjustment. What worked perfectly in this room was setting the phase at 45 degrees of phase, and that's exactly where I had beautiful integration, essentially where the subwoofer and the drivers of the speaker were all singing on the same page. And we'll talk a bit further about adjusting that when I am looking at you down the camera, and we're talking about the sonic presentation and my thoughts. So I am using the EQ here. So the EQ is in. We are boosting around about 30 hertz in this room, as you can see there. So I can adjust that right the way around to 150 hertz of adjustment. The Q factor here is at 1. That seemed to be a nice sweet spot in the middle there. And we're running around about probably 4 dB of boost, roughly here, 3 or 4 dB of boost. And then the output is set essentially roughly at about 12 o'clock on the sub. And I tend to be moving that in between the O for output and L for level, and no further around than that, and no further out than the O for output. And then obviously there's a standby button there and the power button for the watch controller. So that is how I've got this unit set up. And now we'll talk a little bit about the sonic improvements in the room by having it in. Okay, so that gives you the layout. We've talked about the way that the system is wired in. We've looked at the setup, essentially, of the watch controller and how I've dialed it in. So this took me about a week of mucking around. I had it fairly close within about an hour. And then there was just some fine tuning of the phase, especially, anywhere between sort of 30 to sort of 60 degrees of phase was roughly what I was adjusting, until I really did realize very quickly that 45 degrees of phase was a total lock-in of the bass and the talking, all of the drivers in the room, the bass drivers in the room talking to each other and actioning each of those drivers, so that everything was literally moving forward and coming back at the same time. So the beautiful thing about the watch controller is you can literally adjust that by a degree of phase. So you can just really literally dial in. That's why I took my time and I was adjusting for quite a while, just to absolutely confirm that I had it locked in. And absolutely, there's no doubt about it. It once, when you know. It just, there's a real sense of a clearing up of the lower octave. So what ends up happening is there's a bit of a mismatch, a little bit of a cancelling out of frequencies when you haven't got the phase perfectly locked in. And then when you find that spot, that sweet spot, bang, all of a sudden it's almost like the curtain is lifted, everything is locked in, and everything, the sense of percussiveness that took place when we locked that 45 degrees of phase in was amazing. Literally quite outstanding, just the difference you could hear. But I want to talk further about not just the lower octave, because yes, there is a
literally a full range. This thing will produce, frequencies down to 16 hertz in the room here. The speakers stop at about 20 hertz. So there is, we're talking about bass at that level, or lower octave presentation at that level, that you can't hear anymore. There's a pressurization that happens. There is a sense of that bass you feel. I just put a short up recently of a yellow track, and look, YouTube just does not do this track, as unfortunately, most of the tracks I put up here don't give you that full idea of just what's happening in the room. There is a total integration of all of the parts of this system. There is a total envelopment of the presentation around the listener. So when you get that low resonant rumble in that yellow track, that atmospheric feel, you literally are looking around. It's like something bigger than you is in the room with you. There's a real sense of atmosphere in the presentation that goes dramatically up from just having these two really, really crazy reference level speakers in the room. By adding the sub, more than just the lower octave changes. So we talked about what I'm hearing as far as the pressurization in the room and the quickness of the lower octave. It's fast. If it's fast in the recording, it's fast in the room. It hits you. It's almost like putting the Stack Audio Orville 100s underneath the Wilsons, the Alexias. There was a real focusing of the energy at the listener. Now, I have got a set of Orville 100s that Josh and Theo from Stack Audio have provided me to put under the subwoofer. That will be a further video. We're going to talk about that. At the moment, this subwoofer is sitting on its casters, for goodness sake. So not even on its spikes. I want to do the delta from the casters, which obviously mean I can roll it around because it's about 116 odd kilos. It's a very heavy box, composite material box that comes from Wilson and the driver. So having it on the casters is absolutely necessary for my health, to being able to move it around. But further to that, when we put the Orville 100s underneath, I'm expecting even further focus of that lower octave. If the Alexias are anything to go by, there's going to be a further improvement there as well. But that's to come in another video. But going further and talking further about the sorts of things that, that I'm hearing in the room, the mid-range is much more focused and precise. There is more spatial cues around all of those frequencies that you would not think this subwoofer would be doing anything about affecting. So this has crossed over at about 60 hertz. So after 60 hertz, we've got an 18 dB slope. It falls over relatively quickly from that 60 hertz point. But what it does to allow space in the room for the mid-range, the mid-bass, the mid-range, and the top end to be able to flourish and bloom and literally present itself with more clarity. Being able to get a subwoofer integrated into your system correctly and on point allows the full frequency response of your speakers to shine. You get to hear more nuance. You get to understand more soundstage depth. You get to hear more clarity in a human voice when it's being sung in the presentation. Instruments have more clarity and more space around them. So the integration of the Watchdog subwoofer and the Watch controller into this system has moved it to literally as good a level of audio presentation as I've ever heard. I sit in my room and I do pinch myself from time to time, and people come in here and they just cannot believe what they're hearing. And that's lovely because it takes me on a journey when I listen to all my favorite tracks. It's like, I've used this analogy a lot, it's like cleaning my reading glasses and then putting them back on and going, oh my goodness, I'm just seeing more clarity in what's happening in front of me and around me, because this is literally and a full, encompassing presentation that happens right out to the very sides, right in front of you, in levels of depth in front of you. Even stuff that happens almost back in behind me. I'm hearing spatial cues everywhere in this room. Now, there's also, some of this has to be attributed to the latest sound treatment that adjustments that I've done in the room. This is really super important, and I've said this on occasion before as well, and I mean every word of it. The room is the body of the instrument to which we listen to our system in. If the body of the instrument is not correct, then what the sound the instrument makes also cannot be correct. Spending some time and some effort and what is comparatively fairly low amounts of money on treatment, acoustic treatment of your room is so important, guys. It really is. It allows you to hear more, unlock more of what your system is already probably producing. You get to create this environment to be able to listen without any distraction or influence of the room's acoustics. And it's super important to get that right. So there's a combination, I suggest, with the subwoofer coming in very quickly after the room treatment tweaks that have been done, of lifting it again to another level. There have just been steps, and you've been following this journey of these steps in my room to get it to this level now. And everybody that's familiar with my system, familiar with my room, says that my room and my system has never sounded this convincing, this integrated, this locked in as it is currently sounding. Hopefully that's coming across in small steps on YouTube when you're listening to it. And if you've got headphones and a decent playback system, some of you do, and you are also hearing the improvements. One of my regular contributors to the comments, Stacey, has been talking quite a bit about hearing the improvements. He's able to pick up on his playback. He's really noticing the differences, and he talks to me about the things that I'm hearing in the room. That's how I know he knows what he's hearing, because you can those areas that he's talking about in his comments are the areas that are really improving. But look, this needs to be said. Add 40% more, and that's what the experience is being in this room, hearing it as well as you possibly can hear it on YouTube. So YouTube can give you an idea of what's happening here. My words, I hope, and my explanations are what really will, set this, this level, if you like, of where things are in the room. But yeah, being in this room is another level again. It's just amazing putting on, the UHQR of Gaucho, for instance. It really does feel like I'm sitting in a tracking room listening to the musicians playing right in front of me, with its dynamic slam and the realism and the sweetness and the analog sound that comes from this turntable and that record is just mind-blowingly good. So yes, that's probably the best way to describe what's going on in the room in recent times with the acoustic treatment adjustments and the subwoofer integration. It's just moved it all up again to another level, and there'll be a further enhancement once we get the stack audio over 100s underneath the subwoofer. So I'll talk about that when we get to that point, but I just wanted to give you that wrap up of just what's been going on with the integration of the sub in the room, how it's transpired, what I'm hearing in the room, and how everything is lifted to another level in all the frequency areas that we judge a system on. So if you've got any questions about this, please leave them in the comments below. Any comments at all are welcome here on the channel. Everybody gets a chance to have their say. Whether you agree with me or disagree with me, that's absolutely fine. This is a subjective hobby. We all hear things differently. All of us have different shaped ears, but that doesn't necessarily mean what I hear is perfect and what you hear you may think is perfect. And again, all of that is absolutely fine. So thanks for watching. If you're enjoying this kind of stuff, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, all I can ask you to do is something that costs you absolutely nothing and means the world to me. And that is push that subscribe button. Let's build this channel. Let's get it moving in the right direction. And let's get more of this sort of content out on the YouTube sphere so we can share this with more like-minded people. It's bye for now.